1979, the Rolling 60s and the A-Trays have been mortal enemies. They've killed over 20 of my homies. And we've killed over, I'm sure, 27, 28, 9.
Changed LA. And what people don't understand is it changed LA in the fact that where now you had to either decide you was gonna be with the neighborhood car or you was gonna be with the gangster car. And it split the gangs of LA up.
The Rolling 60s and the A-Tray Gangsters are two legendary gangs in LA and around the world. They both have sets all over the country and are respected all over. The Rolling 60s were established over 40 years ago. Today, they're one of the deepest gangs there is. The Rolling 60s have many allies, with them being in the neighborhood card, and them also being Rolling Nose. I covered some of the other gangs they're aligned with in my first 2 episodes. But the 60s also have a list of rivals, being blood gangs like Crenshaw Mafia, BPS, Brims, and the Inglewood families. They also beef with gangster Crips like the 5-1 Troubles, and especially the A-Tray Gangsters. Other nemesis are the Hoover Criminals. The A-Trays were also established over 40 years ago. The A-Trays are also a big gang. They gained worldwide recognition with Monster Cody's book and other violent acts in 1992 that were broadcast all over and still talked about today. The A-Tray Gangsters are allies of gangs in the gangster car, like the Avalons, the Broadways, the Troubles, and many more. Even with past issues, they're on good terms with the Inglewood families and the Hoover Criminals. The Hoovers have one set claiming Gangster Crip, and that's the 5 Deuce Hoovers. The A-Tray Gangsters are rivals to gangs in the neighborhood car, especially the 60s, the 90s, and gangs in the 100s. Their beef with these gangs have been deadly, but the beef with the 60s has been the most historic. That being said, I'm going to go into some cases in this beef. This beef has been over 40 years, so I won't be able to cover everything, but the few cases I will go into will shed light of this war. I will start off going back about 15 years. The first 2 cases will be a sequence of events that happened in the same day. Around 3:30, May 19, 2005, Yusuf Brooks was standing outside with Rolling 60 members when 2 men pulled up in a Chevy, and Yusuf would hear the passenger yell out, "A-Tray Hoover," then begin shooting. Yusuf would be the only one shot, and he would be shot in the leg. When the police arrived, Yusuf would tell the police the driver was from A-Tray Gangsta, and his name was Joe Nash, aka Little Ant. Yusuf would pick him up out of a lineup at the hospital. Yusuf would even tell the police about a prior run-in with Joe, where Joe would bang on him and told him to take off his Yankee hat. Joe Nash would be determined to be the driver, and Derek Boston the shooter. The police would try to give him life, but Yusuf's testimony would be looked at as unreliable. They would say he had a motive with Joe, with them having personal issues in the past, and him also being a rival gang member. Joe Nash, the fifth team, will argue, how could him and Derek Boston be involved if the passenger yelled out Hoover? Both of them were not connected to Hoover and were both documented A-Tray Gangsta members. Joe Nash and Derek Brown were both acquitted. Same day, 3 hours later, May 19, 2005, Derek Boston, who was involved in the first case, was sitting outside with other A-Tray members. A car will pull up and diss A-Tray and begin shooting. Derek and another A-Tray member will be shot. The police will receive a call and eventually spotted the car in the drive-by. The car will lead a chase, but eventually will be pulled over. The driver and the passenger will be taken into custody. 2 members of the A-Tray Gangsters would identify Keely Williams as the driver in the shooting. The passenger would be identified as being Chico from Rolling 60s. Even with Keely Williams having alibis, almost all the A-Tray Gangsters who were outside at the time would identify him in the shooting. Keely Williams was sentenced to 50 years to life. This next case is about Damian Watts, aka Lil Chopper from Rolling 60s. October 20th, 2005, 2 A-Tray members, Andre and Lester, were sitting outside in A-Tray turf. A few men would jump out and begin shooting at them and jump back in the car and sped off. No one would be injured. 10 minutes later, the same day, October 20th, 2005, Damian will also do another shooting in A-Tray turf. Paul Fry and Thomas Sender will be shot at. Thomas Sender will lose his life, and Paul Fry will be seriously injured. October 21st, The next day, Damien Watts would also be involved in another shooting where someone would lose their life. A few people will testify on that case. Over this 2-day shooting spree, Damien Watts received life without the possibility of parole. September 5th, 2008, John Jackson, aka Baby Knockout, from R.I.P Gangsta will lose his life. It will be blamed on the Rolling 60s. Later that day, a man will lose his life outside of an apartment complex in the Rolling 60s turf. The police will go to the R.I.P Gangsta's turf after the shooting, and later recover weapons used in the shooting, after grabbing up a few R.I.P members. The police will interview Devontae Brooks, aka G-Tay from R.I.P Gangsta, and he will spill everything. He will give the police the names of who could be involved, and he will say Kenneth Smith was the shooter. Kenneth Smith will say in his interview he had nothing to do with the shooting, and that G-Tay and G-Smash were the actual shooters. He would say G-Tay had a vendetta against him, and that was the only reason why he said he did the shooting. It would later be proven that Kenneth Smith was the shooter, and Kenneth Smith was sentenced to life. The last case happened on May 31st, 2010. A party was held at Regina Robinson's home. Among the people were Christopher Galloway, Aaron Loud, and DeAndre Smith. Smith was associated with the Rolling 60s. Kenneth Bennett approached the party and ran into Christopher, Aaron, and DeAndre on the porch. They would say he would be aggressive, trying to get into the party. DeAndre would do most of the talking, trying to calm down the situation. Kenneth Bennett would tell them he was from R.I.P Gangsta and continued to be aggressive. He demanded to get into the party. After Christopher, DeAndre, and Aaron tried to go into the house, Kenneth and another man he was with began to shoot. Christopher would be shot and lose his life. A few weeks later, Aaron would identify Kenneth as being the shooter. They would search his home and recover a gun in his home. It was determined to be involved in the shooting. While being interviewed, Kenneth would admit to the police that he was at the party. Kenneth told police he went to the party alone and that he bought the gun weeks after the shooting. He would even tell the police he didn't shoot anyone. He said the people at the party pulled guns out on him and they shot their own friend by mistake. In booking, Kenneth would make a few phone calls. He would make a phone call and talk about the shooting. He would talk about his fingerprints being on the gun, and he will also have 3 other phone calls putting himself to the crime. 2 with other R.I.P members and another with his grandma. Kenneth Bennett was sentenced to 40 years to life. March 31st, 2019 was the death of Nipsey Hussle, and his death hurt LA. Even dudes from enemy hoods would show their respect for him and what he did in the community and the industry. But notably, the 60s and the R.I.Ps would come together for a short time period with no violence. Street Gang TV would cover this moment.
Nipsey Hussle, the great.
We're from R.I.P Gangsters. We brought us up. We're here, and we're telling the nation we're here to come and talk to the 60s or anybody else that want to talk to try to stop this senseless gun violence. What we're showing is people say it can't be done, but we're showing it can be done.
Even though these gangs will have this moment after 40 years, they still beef to this day. Even though it's far-fetched, hopefully at least it could be a ceasefire one day. With that being said, this will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, check out my previous videos. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.